Fine. I didn't have a start screen. It's all good. We're live. We're live and on the check-in. We're doing a little bit something like this. Hit it. I'm gonna hit it in a second. Hang on. Yeah. Peace and love, everybody. I know you're just tuning in, checking us out. And I'm happy to see you. I am back with another episode of Hip Hop Can Save America, the live version, the live stream show every Monday night, almost every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to keep going the rest of this month. I think the 11th, we definitely have a show for you. The 18th, we may not. And then the 25th is Christmas Day. So who knows? Maybe we'll be in a gift giving mood, and I'll come and rock with you if you're so willing. Again, remember, I'm testing out these systems. Peace to Ada Johnson, Miss Thursday in the building. Peace to Andrew Wang. It has been a minute, a couple weeks out. And peace, my man, my mellow Silent Night on the check-in, of course. I appreciate y'all. If you're watching on a platform other than YouTube, please swing over to YouTube. You can go to hiphopcansaveamerica.com/watch. We want to make sure that we're kind of migrating over to that platform. Shouts to Luna on LinkedIn. It looks like, well, I'll still broadcast to a couple of the platforms, but I want to make sure that, we take full advantage of YouTube's they're built for this a little bit more. So that's what we're going to do. Tonight, we have a great show. It'll be a lot less of me babbling, babble on the mic, as they say, because we have a guest that is quite, accomplished in the world, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could with him. We will be, as I mentioned in the header leading up to this, investigating a little bit of the continuing cover-up of the murder of Biggie Smalls and Notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace by the LAPD, and that investigation, which, unlike similar celebrity hip-hop murder, Tupac Shakur has seen some movement lately. Now, this won't be the DJ Vlad type stuff. It's not the art of dialogue. We're not going to go there. We're not going to do all that stuff. You know me well enough to know that I don't chase that kind of salacious stuff. I don't check that kind of, clickbaity, gossipy stuff. But you will see from my interview, which was pre-recorded earlier today, couldn't be with us live, with Don Sikorski, who is the producer and host of a podcast called The Dossier, which now for 2 seasons has looked into this case, this murder, and Long Island, Los Angeles Police Department's involvement and cover up, and does so in a way that I think, like, if you go on all the, those aforementioned shows, for example, and talk to people or see people being interviewed who were in some way connected to the Biggie Smalls murder, you'll hear a lot of different stories, and you'll hear a lot of different spin. You'll hear a lot of different rumors. And you'll hear a lot of different alibis or, names being dropped. The reason why I got into this interview tonight, because I don't chase that kind of stuff, as you know, but I found that Sikorski's work was really credible in how much he relies on forensic journalism, right? Documents that were filed with the government, law, legal documents that he has from the FBI that are unredacted and have not been seen elsewhere. So there's real investigative clout to what he's been doing. So I found it interesting, and I wanted to talk to him, and I will run that interview in just a bit. Again, I'm starting a little bit frazzled, just because there was a lot to do with that. So bear with me as I get it together. You can find us, of course, on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you already know this. We're at hiphopcansaveamerica.com/watch. That's the easiest way to get to me. I do have the Santa beard going, Andrew. You know what I mean? Ho, ho, ho. It's Christmas time in Hollis, Queens, and everywhere else. But of course, there's a lot of other holidays happening. And so shouts to whatever holiday you might celebrate. And you know what? I'm sending out a newsletter. And one of the things I said in the beginning was that, this is unrelated to hip hop. This is me commentating, but one thing that I've noticed about us as a society lately in the recent years, getting older and, being more conscious of people's, feelings and mental health and self care and all the good things that have come out of the last few years of just kind of a higher consciousness or going through pandemic. And, one of the things we've heard a lot and we think of, I'd like to think, is that the holidays are not always joyous for everybody. Right? A lot of us do find a lot of enjoyment in the holidays, getting with family, doing all the holiday things. But for a lot of people, it's not that. And I respect and want to be compassionate about that. So I try to temper my own personal, celebratory stuff, when it comes to the public, me being a sort of public facing person. And I also think it helps us because we think of that during this time of year, and maybe that gives us fuel for the rest of the year to kind of fuel our empathy muscles. You know what I mean? So that during the rest of the year, we remember that not everyone is us, and we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And so think about that. For what it's worth, not everyone has a great time during the holiday season. And we should remember that and just remember that not everyone is. You never know what they say, that you never know what someone's going through. So salute to if you're enjoying the holiday season, salute if you're not. And if you're not, but you love hip hop and you love all the wonderful, cool things that it can do, and it'll make you smile, I'll keep putting out content during the holiday season and we'll just pretend it's not the holidays. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. It'll be you and me and it'll be fine. And let everyone else go, you know, uh, celebrate the capitalistic celebration of the Christianization of the world and blah, 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 blah. Shouts to Jay Corbin. What up, Jay? Wow, that's a old we go. That's a OG friend right there. Salute, my friend. Good to see you out here. Checking. I think your first time checking in, so that's what's up. I appreciate you. I want to go over a couple things as I do. Once again, our good friend Silent Night, who often checks in with me, is not here tonight. I think he's checking in. I wanted to share a few stories that you can get links to if you sign up for the newsletter that I put out. I put out a newsletter to kind of accompany this, and it's all kind of vibes like this. So important, interesting, enlightening stories of hip hop, music, and culture. Again, I don't necessarily report on the latest drops or the latest albums or give my 2 cents on the gossipy stuff of the day, even the big gossipy stuff. I mean, we've had some pretty big stories that have involved hip hop moguls and other business and other things. Sometimes I'll give them in the show. Tonight, not so much because I want to get into this interview. It's lengthy and it's substantive, but I often will send out stories of interesting exceptionalism, hip hop exceptionalism. Let's just say that being used in different ways. So if you want to get that, there's the address on the screen. It's a free newsletter, mannyfaces.substack.com. If you want to jump off and subscribe right now, that'd be fine. I'll wait. If you've already subscribed, that's great. I appreciate you. And you'll get all kind of stories. You also get events that are happening if you're a hip hop educator, if you're a hip hop culture kind of advocate, if you're interested in the intersections that hip hop, does with education or mental health therapy or theater or, financial literacy or really anything, business. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for creative, clever ways to incorporate the music and the culture and the vibes and the ethos that you love into what you do. This newsletter will give you kind of those kind of insights. And that's it. If you want to help support this show and be part of it, you can visit us at patreon.com/mannyfaces. And shouts to our recent additions to our Patreon family, Mr. Andrew Wang, who's in the audience, I think, and Dr. Raphael Travis, who have become supporters of the show. I'm fiercely independent. I don't like to, you'll hear me talk about this in the interview. I don't like to necessarily take other people's money. I don't like the idea of sponsorships. I don't like the idea of being kind of run by a corporation or what have you. Again, we talk about these music moguls and their companies, and I may or may not have been asked to, maybe take a meeting, or maybe I, was suggested that I take a meeting with a big company that was run by a big mogul who has now stepped down as CEO of that company. Don't know if I would have wanted to end up there. I don't know if that's the kind of vibe I'm into. So that being said, you can help us out. And I want to show a couple of stories that I've come across in the last week or so. If you and then we'll get into the interview. Just letting people check in. So this is an article on Teen Vogue, of all places. you'll check me out on check me out. I'd love to be on Teen Vogue, but you'll check out this story on Teen Vogue about Stella Standing Bear. Stella Standing Bear is a Native American hip hop artist. The rising Oglala Lakota star uses music to amplify modern and indigenous issues and promote healing. I know that this is not something that gets enough attention in our quote unquote hip hop media. I know that this person does not get that much attention. And Teen Vogue has done a good job profiling her. So I thought that was fascinating. I wanted to share that out. We've touched upon some Native American artists in the past. You know, we folks are familiar with Superman and Frank. Help me out. Help me out, chat. Frank. You know what I'm talking about. Sorry, can't remember the name. But to that point, there's not enough information and not enough people talking about indigenous artists in America. And I love this profile, and I wanted to share that with y'all again. Look her up, Stella Standing Bear. You'll be able to check her out uh, wherever you know, find music and such. One thing I want to show, and I didn't put them up today. I'll probably link them in the newsletter. And I didn't have time to put up the trailers. You know, I like to throw video into this mix since we're doing this beautiful video live streaming. Two documentaries that you might be interested in. If you're an older hip hop head, you know, you might recognize these folks. If you're a younger hip hop head and you're not familiar, it's still two good documentaries that are about artists and their journey through the music business. And I think that we always talk about the youth don't understand and respect you know, the OGs and da da da. We don't always give them the opportunity to. We don't always show them how. And there are two good documentaries out that are worth watching. One is called May the Lord Watch, and it's a story of Little Brother. If you know Little Brother, it was essentially a 3 or 2 man group, depending on who you're asking at what time we're talking about. Ninth Wonder, Pooh, and Fonte out of North Carolina. Made a big splash on the scene. The days of Tribe Called Quest, the days of De La Soul had that native tongues kind of vibe. Weren't affiliated directly, but definitely had that kind of vibe. Ninth Wonder, of course, then went on to do production for Jay-Z and a whole bunch of things. So Little Brother was a great, I don't want to say underground backpack conscious. It's kind of how they were labeled, but they made a big impact on the music business, and they made an impact on music lovers everywhere. There's a documentary about them. I saw it on YouTube. I assume that's where it exists, but I'm not actually sure like where it exists. Like it may be on one of the streaming platforms. I saw it on YouTube. And the other one, which I haven't seen yet, which is a Paramount, if you have Paramount streaming, is a documentary about Drez from Black Sheep. So I haven't seen it yet, so I can't talk about it. But apparently, you know, that's a look at Drez from Black Sheep. You know, choice is yours, this or that. You know who I'm talking about. And apparently, these are two good documentaries. I definitely like documentary about Little Brother. That was actually, you know, pretty interesting to me. I knew the group. I didn't quite know the dynamics. I certainly didn't know all the ins and outs. And it's an interesting tale, especially I talk about like young artists. You know, it's a different game now. So don't get it twisted. I don't always think that the OGs who say the YGs need to pay attention to us. I don't always think that's the case. I think we have a lot to learn from the younger artists, the way they manipulate the systems, the way they've used technology, the way they've been able to, you know, make career moves out of social media, or, you know, that's something that we don't, that generally speaking, older folk, you know, don't know how to do. We did it in our day with mixtapes and we did it with the technology at hand, but it's a different game now. So we often hear OGs, you know, barking a little bit at that the respect and the reverence that the younger folk don't have for the old folk. Well, I think that by barking at them, it's never gonna quite get them to pay attention, but maybe checking out these really well done documentaries might. So once again, shouts to Little Brother and the folks who put together that documentary. It's called May the Lord Watch, the story of Little Brother, something like that. And then the other one is Drez on Paramount Plus. I usually talk about conferences. I will talk about conferences in another episode. And of course, I will always put out on the newsletter some great academic or artistic conferences. So please subscribe to the newsletter. Once again, mannyfaces.substack.com. Once again, if you're just tuning in, I did promote it. It's a big thing. We're going to talk about the ongoing investigation or lack thereof into the murder of Biggie Smalls. Just a couple minutes. I'm just trying to stay within my time frame and my normal segments. So y'all bear with me. Just like I talked about indigenous artists in hip hop that don't get enough love. I want to talk about. I don't have it on here. Oh yeah, I do. Africa, Africa. So shouts to African Voices magazine. You have to pay for it if you want it, but if you're interested in this stuff, you'll get your hands on it. African Voices Hip Hop at 50, the special digital issue of African Voices. Now, I'll tell you with the next thing I'm going to talk about. I find the hip hop scene in Africa as fascinating as I do the hip hop scene overseas, like in Europe and such, and perhaps more so because Africa, many countries in Africa are developing quickly and having sort of an infrastructure. We talked last episode, not last week, but last episode with Farbion, who runs a couple of internationally focused hip hop organizations, works with folks in Berlin, the hip hop Bronx Berlin connection. And then, of course, is now working with American Voices and was just about to go. Where was he going? Hope it was Africa. I forget the country. They were waiting to see. They're waiting to see if they got clearance and all that. But anyway, so I work with I know a bunch of folks that are kind of working with youth in other countries and doing this like cross international collaboration. So I thought this was really interesting. I'm hiding it. It says African Voices Hip Hop at 50. You can just Google this, but I'll send it out in the newsletter. I thought it was really interesting. And to follow up on that, my good friend, from Howard University, Professor Messiah Clark. Sia put out a great book called Hip Hop in Africa. I have it here on the shelf somewhere a few years ago, and was just on an episode. There's a translation thing here, which I can't quite get because it's in a different language, but if you look for it. So Hip Hop in Africa, Radio Africa Magazine. Oh, I know why, because I'm not doing this. Boom. Got it. Bear with me. I'm the only one running this tech. You know this. It looked nice, but sometimes I gotta work on getting it together. It's in Spanish. RadioAfricaMagazine.com. Hip Hop in Africa, Prophets of the City and Philosophers of the Dust. I don't need to remind you that one of the only places you're gonna find people highlighting hip hop, music, and culture like this is here. So just want to point you in the right direction. There's a lot of hip hop that isn't found on your top hip hop media, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I do. A couple of stories just to give you a little tease. The trick is, and I hope you do this, the trick is free newsletter, mannyfaces.substack.com. I have all these stories, and it's hip hop news that isn't about dumb-ish. And I'll give you an example. It's Christmas time, right? Oh, if you'll be at Art Basel in Miami, you're going to see these folks down there. And it's Christmas time. It's a good time to buy a gift, right? For those who are celebrating holidays. And I know these folks. It's a good recommendation. Let me recommend something to you.
Hip-hop party card game ain't for kids, and it ain't trivia. In fact, it's disrespectful, because your favorite rapper is trash. I'm Manny Faces, and this is
Hip-hop news that isn't about dumb shit.
University of Dope is a black and woman-owned operation founded by two college friends, and from its humble beginnings, now sits on the shelves of one of the nation's largest retailers. Instead of right or wrong answers, this game inspires debates and conversations about hip-hop that'll engage, delight, and enrage true fans of the music and culture. But it's all in good fun, as co-founder A.V. Perkins told me.
You know, when you're with your family, you're not holding there's no holds bars, right? So you're really just giving it like, oh, well, Jay-Z and Etha and, all of that stuff. So you kind of go, we wanted people to have that same feeling. The nostalgia, the fun, the reminiscence of it all.
So pick up University of Dope online or at Target and peep my whole interview with A.V. Perkins on YouTube.
So once again, just a little taste of hip-hop news that isn't about dumb-ish, stuff that's important and cool and creative. And again, you'll find all that stuff if you sign up for the newsletter. Once again, shout out to our sponsors. We will have a full rundown of our sponsors. They include Nicholas, they include Brianna, they include Steffi, they include Silent Night, they include Toast, they include Mark, they include, of course, Andrew Wang, of course, Dr. Raphael Travis. We will have a much better way to thank everyone for contributing. Shout out to Calvin Penny in place. What up? Good to see you, my friend. And shouts to everyone else that's tuned in and turned up on the chat. Once again, if you're watching on a platform other than YouTube, let's move on over there. We can get you on YouTube, hiphopcouldsaveamerica.com/watch. Manifest Vision in the house on YouTube, matter of fact, and that would be my good friend Adam7, aka Mecha Godzilla. Yo, let me tell you something, bro. It's a good time to be a Godzilla fan. I'm not gonna go off on a tangent. This is Hip Hop Could Save America, not Godzilla World 101. But that Godzilla -1, whoo, that is, whoo, boy, is that a good movie. Peace and love, my friend. Go see that if y'all into any kind of Godzilla-ness. It's a good time. Andrew Wang points out that this last weekend, the International Hip Hop Symposium rocked, and so shouts to that. Andrew, maybe you'll give us a quick rundown on that next week when you're on. Shouts to Hood Scholar, the good homie Hood Scholar, for having Yonkers participate up in there. So international hip hop, as you know from my work with the Global Conference on Hip Hop Education that we did a few weeks ago. Hip hop is super global. It's involved in all kind of areas, including education, mental health, therapy, and other ways that uplift humanity. And that's what we're here to talk about. Oh man, you got to go see it, bro. I don't know if you saw it already, but let's go. Shouts to Bob Knutson, who's a great supporter of ours. Watched on YouTube in Wisconsin. I guess that's what Scotty is Scotty. Is that what y'all call Wisconsin? Scotty? That's cool. Bob Knutson doing some great things out there and following us. He's like crossing the podcast streams. He comes from another podcast and he's watching us here. Anyway, let's get into it. Once again, if you want to support this show, you can. Patreon.com/MannyFaces. We're here every Monday night from 9 p.m. Of course, you can catch all the replays on YouTube. We'll be here the 11th, and with Andrew Wang and some folks from Yonkers. We'll be talking about that Yonkers hip hop history. Also may have another guest on the 11th. Ooh, it could be 2 for 1, especially if you're into technology. That could be cool. I haven't confirmed it yet, but we're working on it. And then the 18th, I have to travel, so I probably won't be around. But the 25th is Christmas Day. If we feel like, being in a gift-giving mood, we'll come online with you and we'll rock with you then. Right now, let me do as promised, since I got some folks watching and I don't want to lose any attention, and I know you don't want to hear me babble on for the rest of the night. This was my interview, again, with Don Sikorski. This gentleman has done a enormous amount of work. Just preparing for the interview, I had to go through 20 podcast episodes, an entire feature film, all kind of 2 books that he didn't write, but he drew information from about the murder of Biggie Smalls, the Notorious B.I.G., Christopher Wallace. We all know the story. We've all heard some things. Some of us have gone down some rabbit holes online. This site, that site, this person talking, that person talking. It's a lot of stuff. And we wonder why this investigation never came to any kind of conclusion, criminally or civilly, right? There was a civil lawsuit as well, filed against the Los Angeles Police Department by Voletta Wallace and the Biggie Smalls estate. And that did not come to fruition either. So it's curious. And there's one person that I feel, there's a lot of people doing this, one person I feel is really getting into the nitty gritty of this. And if you give me 1 second, I will find a way to get this video up. Oh, that's so anticlimactic. Interesting. Where do we have the interview? Aha! Got it. Okay. Bear with me. I'm still working this out, and I'm the only one. So here we go. This would be my interview with Don Sikorski, who is the producer. He's a television and film producer. He's a producer of a movie called City of Lies, which starred Johnny Depp. And matter of fact, let me play that for you right quick. I didn't even know this movie was a thing, right? This came out in 2021. Y'all familiar with this?
was murdered last night.
My son was shot.
Why?
20 years ago, you were the lead detective on the Biggie Smalls case, right?
Some suspect the shooting of the notorious B.I.G. is retaliation for last year's murder of Tupac Shakur.
Biggie didn't have Tupac killed.
They cover up the corrupt.
A couple brothers get shot, and nobody gives a damn, do they?
All my shooters and mates planning on moving weight.
The unsolved murder of 2 young men. You have any suspects?
Ain't no name dropping. Say my name assassinating.
As long as it's an ongoing investigation, some evidence stays locked away in the dark.
Who shot Biggie Smalls?
It's a riddle.
So once again, I didn't know that this was even a movie. Came out in 2019. Apparently, I don't know, was maybe not released domestically. I saw some comments. I don't even know. Couldn't tell you. And don't know what to say. This was a dramatization of a book, which you'll hear about, that was produced by my guest, who is now the producer and host of a in-depth podcast series, deep dive, if you will, called The Dossier. 2 seasons, and the second one is subtitled The Secret Biggie FBI Files. Listen to this interview. Pretty interesting. And I'll come back and talk about it at the end with you. How about that? Let's go. See Manny Faces. Hip hop can save America. Now, again, I start off, well, I don't usually get into this kind of stuff. This ain't DJ him or that DJ him. And we don't get into that crime and da-da-da and all that negativity. But this is interesting. Rock with me. Let's go. Don Sikorski, thank you for joining me today, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, Manny. How are you doing?
I'm doing as well as I guess can be expected these days. So I'll take that. Any day that's good is great. I want to thank you for joining me. I've been digging into The Dossier, the podcast. I've given people a little bit of a rundown of who you are and why we're speaking tonight. But I'd like to just give you the space to, introduce yourself as you like to be presented to the world. Sometimes we just read people's bios, and that's not how they're feeling that day. So please, if you would, tell people, who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I like to call myself an investigative journalist, and my day job is a television producer. I graduated from NYU, and for lack of a better word, what I've always liked to dig into is stories that surround criminal justice, stories that surround the courts, jails, police corruption, and specifically for some of my career, the intersection of all of that stuff as it relates to hip hop music, right? Because I think the story of hip hop also delves into criminal justice.
Yeah, there's definitely, for sure, a lot of crossover along these things, along those lines. So I want to start at the end, and then, well, not at the end, but at where we are, and then we'll, kind of go backwards in time a little bit. In reference to your work covering, in particular, the Biggie Smalls murder, in reference to the movie, the Dossier podcast, and everything that's led up to the point where we are right now today on this date in November in 2023. Let me just ask you, is the criminal case into the murder of Biggie Smalls still open?
So if you were to ask the Los Angeles Police Department, they would tell you yes. That would be a lie. And that would be sort of their public perception that they want people to believe. But from weeks after Big was killed, the LAPD has never been interested in solving this case because it involved LAPD officers. And that's a fact. So they will tell you it's open. But again, that is just a laundry list of things that they've lied about.
Right. And again, I just want to, before I go even further, the meticulous details, the line of investigation that you've gone throughout many years now, maybe over a decade, I'm not quite sure, that details the things that you're talking about is incredible. when you look at the effort that it must have taken to, come across all the stuff that you've come across. And we'll go into that. Is the civil case against the LAPD regarding the death of Christopher Wallace, Biggie Smalls, by the Wallace family, is that still open?
Well, there's two different versions that I've been told by the lawyers for the Wallace family. And one of them I still don't understand, and it is the following. There was a period of time that Miss Wallace had to refile the civil case against the LAPD for the wrongful death lawsuit. And if she did not file it, Biggie's kids could then file it. That hasn't happened. In season 2 of my podcast, towards the end, I'm trying to get those answers now, because that's a gray area that exists. I do know that there are people within the FBI, and I think within the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles, that are kind of looking at this possibly as a criminal investigation again. I don't have all of the details about that. But as far as the civil case being refiled, that has not happened as of yet.
Got it. Understood. So, where did this start for you in terms of, and I don't want to do the DJ Vlad thing. I'm not going to ask all the questions that you spend all the time in the podcast answering. Yeah, I want people to listen to the podcast. I want, the season, the first season, second season, go see the movie, City of Lies that you've produced as well. Where did this all start? And then we'll kind of a little bit quickly. It's a long story. We don't have all that day. You've been doing this for a million years, but I would like to know sort of the chronology of how this started and evolved for you as a journalist, as a filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, for me, there was two things with this story that I wanted to do. The first thing is I never felt that the story of Christopher Wallace was ever a story about police corruption, social justice, or the criminal justice system. And I said, how do you tell that story, right? And that's a bigger story. And secondarily to that, when I went into this, I have to be honest, I looked at all of the stuff that had been done on Big and Pac, and I said, there's really nothing else to do. Everyone has really talked in a sense, or told the same stories over and over again. And I found FBI agent Phil Carson. And I said, here is an FBI agent who has never spoken, who his only goal was to get to the truth of what happened and why it was covered up. And not only did he do that, he was shut down by very powerful people within the city of Los Angeles, right? So you had an amazing character who could take you inside of this machine of Los Angeles over a period of time and show police corruption, show corruption of the United States attorney. And that's a powerful story, right? Because I come from, went to college in the 90s in New York City, and there's these seminal police corruption cases that you see, the Central Park Five, Sean Bell, Eric Gardner, right? And I said to myself, the story of Christopher Wallace, albeit it is a music hip hop success story, you can't tell one without the sort of criminal justice side of his story. And secondarily to that, you have one of the largest ever police cover-ups that's ever been orchestrated in this country surrounding his death, right? And that's an important story to tell, that I continue to try to tell it, because it's my contention is there are people within the Los Angeles Police Department, within the United States Attorney's Office, that know the truth. And the hope is that one day more people will tell it and really make people understand how this cover-up operated.
Yeah. So it is again, this is the big, a big overarching question. The Los Angeles Police Department, in an effort to avoid, from what I understand, from certainly listening to more recent episodes, in a specific effort to avoid having to pay hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in a civil lawsuit as well as embarrassment, all the other kind of things that could happen, mistrust now between law enforcement and the public, have since day one been covering this up. Their involvement, the involvement of officers who helped facilitate this event.
Yes, sir. I mean, you can make an argument. I was in a meeting one time at a television studio, and as television executives tend to do, after he heard this full story, he kind of looked at me and he was like, "Well, this is really $1 billion cover up." And I said,
Right.
"Yeah, I mean, his estate with what it's worth now, I think at the time that Miss Wallace was suing the city of Los Angeles and the LAPD, Keith Clinkscales got up on the stand at the civil trial and walked through, Biggie's earnings or future earnings of what, his estate and his music and his value as a global superstar, right? And
could have been
$500 million at that time, and listen, there was people who came to Phil Carson and said, if this civil lawsuit is to be proven true, you could bankrupt a city institution. A $500 million settlement is a massive amount of money for a city, if you really think about it. And whether they rectify that at some point, I don't know. Or there's, maybe there's a version of the Wallace family getting some form of closure on this, right? Because that's the other thing for the Wallace family,
Yeah, I've seen interviews with folks who are associated with or whatever, and they talk about how painful it must be to over all these years, still have to go in, like you still got to deal with it. Every time you go into a new filing or a new thing or a new rumor or a new story, you relive the whole thing, but at the same time you've never quite gotten the justice I think that everyone would want for someone in their family. Again, just taking it back a little bit, you worked on this case as a journalist. How did the movie come about? How did your involvement, like taking this really from covering it to blowing it out in media, exponentially?
Yeah, I have a very good friend of mine, Brad Furman, who is a Hollywood film director. He directed Lincoln Lawyer. I produced another film with him called The Infiltrator with Bryan Cranston and John Leguizamo. And in Hollywood for many years, there was a book that was floating around called Labyrinth that was written by Randall Sullivan. And that book had been optioned by Sylvester Stallone. It had been optioned by Leonardo DiCaprio. And it was this property within Hollywood that people had tried to make, but had just never made it. And me and Brad were able to get the rights to the book, and we set out to make the movie. Now, the big piece of that puzzle in Hollywood is always a big name. At that time, Brad was able to convince Johnny Depp to play, Russell Poole, and Forrest Whitaker sort of played this journalist character that was created to sort of infuse the investigative parts of this that Randall's book brought forth. And we spent about 4 years making that movie, and it just so happened the timing of it all sort of happened at the same time. The movie was coming together. I sort of met Phil and was putting the pieces of the puzzle together about Phil, right? And so in this weird synergistic way, timing is everything in life. This all kind of came together in that moment. The dossier was created and City of Lies was created, and I think they're kind of, if you watch City of Lies, at the end of City of Lies is where Dossier picks up, right?
I was going to say, sort of, what's the revelation in the movie, right? Because there had to be a big, kicker in the movie. And then what then did you discover that turned into then the work you've been doing since?
In the movie, the story of Russell Poole is he is the first LAPD detective to be given the Biggie case. And he starts to investigate it, and he's on the right path. And he is finding involvement of LAPD officers with connections to death row. And Russell Poole's career is ruined at the LAPD. Now, cut to when Russ Poole is pushed out of the LAPD and retires, Phil Carson takes what Randall Poole did. He actually brings on Randall Poole as a confidential informant within his federal investigation. And Phil Carson, in a similar way, is sort of told, you can't look this way. You can't look into this. This is too big. Like if you continue this investigation, there's going to be massive problems within the city of Los Angeles. So they have like singular and similar paths. The only difference is Phil Carson was not pushed out of the FBI because he, went and found out the truth of the Biggie murder investigation. The opposite of that. He retired a decorated FBI agent, and the FBI supported his investigation into the murder of Biggie. But in Los Angeles, the United States attorney, officials within the city, officials within the LAPD are more powerful than the FBI, if you can believe that. That is true.
Interesting.
In that particular instance. For the most part, people think the FBI, they think all powerful, all knowing. In this particular instance in Los Angeles, the powers that be had enough power to kind of, for lack of a better word, push the FBI away from doing this case for a number of reasons. One, money. Two, that it would have ruined the relationship between the LAPD and the FBI in Los Angeles, who work together a lot. So that's really the path of this story.
Yeah. Question about this cover up, this idea that it exists. There's two parts of this. There's one is the fact that a murder happened, and everyone pretty much agrees that a murder happened. This was a murder, and the cover up part of it. So again, here's another big overarching question that we don't have to get into all the details. It's what I want people to follow the show and listen to. Did these investigators know definitively who killed Biggie?
Yes, they knew definitively who killed Biggie weeks after Biggie was killed. There are internal LAPD documents. There was an internal LAPD investigation that happened. And inside these internal LAPD documents, which I discovered, it states in plain sight that Rafael Perez and David Mack and possibly Kevin Gaines were involved in the murder of Biggie. These
were officers.
These were LAPD officers. And that the LAPD's own investigation into this, meaning internal affairs, right? Because if you really truly understand the story, David Mack, Rafael Perez, they had massive internal affairs files and documents, right? And these files really tell the story of who they were as cops and as corrupt cops. And so when this happened, there was enough information that existed for the LAPD themselves to go, oh shit, these guys were involved. And that is when the sort of handling of this at the highest levels of the LAPD started, and that kind of makes sense because, I mean, you can just do the calculus on that goes on inside of that building, right? We have dirty cops. We've coming off the Rodney King. We're coming off, the Rampart police scandal, which was a massive scandal in Los Angeles. And then, oh my God, now we have one of hip hop's rising stars murdered as part of a conspiracy with our dirty officers. It's almost unbelievable in a way.
It sounds like a movie. It should have been a movie, and then it's real life, and then it was a movie. And now it's even more of a movie, I think, because now we've talked about, obviously, the things you've discovered since then. And let me just, while I got you, the journalist in me and the journalist in you, the investigative part, the forensics of digging through, you're a guy. And there's a few guys that say things about what happened in this case, right? And there's a few theories and theorists and folks, and But what I think separates, maybe, as far as I could tell from looking at folks that have been covering this for years, going past, like you said, the stuff that everyone says, and then going past the salaciousness of it all, is the paperwork, is the paper trail. Can you just give
Yes.
an idea for those who aren't journalists how deep that pile of papers must be, or roomfuls, and the process in securing that stuff, and how important that is to covering any story of human life?
That is a big part of what I did in the podcast. Is, to your point, I saw a lot of people go out publicly and talk about these things and not tell the truth, right? And so what I wanted to do in this investigation is I wanted to not only tell a story, but I wanted to back it up and substantiate it with internal documents of the entities that were involved. Now, I will tell you, I have 3 different, let's say, groupings of files that I was able to acquire, okay? The first batch of files I have are what are considered the original LAPD homicide investigation by Russell Poole. Those are like, let's call them step 1, right? The second set of files that I think are the most valuable is when Miss Wallace and the Wallace family filed their civil lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. Like any criminal or civil case, there's something called discovery. And what that means is the LAPD and the city of Los Angeles had to hand over to the Wallace family a massive treasure trove of internal LAPD documents, okay? Now, those documents are under federal seal, which means they were under federal seal by a federal judge saying these documents are not to be made public. Mrs. Wallace's private investigator, Sergio Robledo, gave me those files, okay? And in looking at that, that is where you have this massive amount of internal LAPD information and case files, and it names the names of the people of the cover-up in black and white. There's no like denying of it. I'm not sitting here guessing on this. It's in the paperwork. And then lastly, and this part I was given by a source who I cannot reveal, I have all of the FBI files as it relates to Biggie's homicide and cover-up that was acquired by the FBI and were unredacted. So then those are the 3 batches of documents that I have that I based my storytelling on and my journalism on. This isn't rumor. This isn't the word of whoever I brought on to talk about this stuff, because as you know, people now are so readily available to sort of twist and turn and tell lies for personal gain, for money, whatever it was. And I said, I'm going to base this on fact and documents and the truth, right? And I felt if I did that, no one can really say anything to me. They could say a lot of things to a lot of other people, but they can't, because you know what? I can show it to them and go, here you go. You don't believe me. Why don't you read it? Now, what I will be doing very shortly is releasing all these documents to the public so everyone else can read them and see the truth, you know? And hopefully use them to further my work, because I have nothing to hide. You know, I just want to tell the story of this as a police cover-up and police corruption, and let people really understand the truth, right? And I think that's a very simple thing when you're doing that.
Yeah, indeed. Interesting. I find it fascinating that listening to the show. This is a question now as a fellow podcast producer, and I do some other shows as well. Are you doing the Dossier Series 2 sort of as you go? Or is it already, like, have you already finished it and you know everything, or you're waiting?
Funny story. In season 1, when I started it, I had 10 episodes. And what happened is I felt the story wasn't over. So I was writing and editing episodes in like a week, where I would write the script on a Monday, I would do an interview, and then I would release it on a Friday. Season 2, I have about 10 episodes done. But with this story, it never shocks me of the people who, as I've been telling this, have reached out, said, I've listened to this. You're actually telling the real story. And guess what? For the first time, I want to come and speak to you about what I know. you know?
Right.
And so what am I going to do? Say no? It's like I'm like,
Right.
yes, of course, get that
Right.
information and I can sort of create and write these episodes if I have the information in a pretty efficient manner because I
Yeah.
don't have to answer to anyone but the truth and myself and what I
Yeah.
think is great and good. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of like I start out with like a base level and then I'm like, oh man, I need like 10 more.
Right. I got you. I can imagine discovering stuff along the way and saying, well, here's got to add one to the pile, one more episode or one more bonus. I see you do bonus episodes as well to fill in some of those gaps. What would
Yeah.
be somebody's, if someone's saying, listen, I've watched the Who Killed Tupac and Biggie's and I've read the books and I've seen the movies and I hear about it all the time. And, I've heard about this guy and I've heard about that guy. And I've watched Vlad and I've watched Dialogue and all these places. This is we'll give you a chance to brag a little bit, maybe, and say, what is something that you've come across or you've discovered or that you've presented that's like, you can tell I'm the one doing this, or this story is the one that's most accurate according to, like you say, the actual facts. What would be one thing to tell people? Now, pay attention to what I'm saying.
Well, I think what you have to pay attention to is the story of Phil Carson, because to your point, when I first met Phil as an FBI agent and he told me a story, I kind of was looking for the angle. Does that make sense? I kind of was looking for why does he have an axe to grind? Was he this disgruntled guy?
Right.
And what I realize now 5-6 years later is Mr. Carson or Phil Carson does not say anything he can't substantiate. And I found in dealing with him, his character and his morals are of the utmost. And it's hard to find that a lot of times in law enforcement, because what you have is guys who are kind of, pushed out, their reputations are ruined.
Right.
This is the opposite of that, right? So you listen to Phil Carson because he had the tools to get to the truth. He could wiretap phones. He could look at bank records. He could interview. He interviewed in upwards of, 20 different confidential informants and confidential sources, right? For many years, he was a part of a team inside the FBI that was undercover inside of death row records and had that information, right? So listen to that. And I think the other thing is what Brad did when he directed City of Lies is he made sure that he took all of the, for lack of a better word, investigative work product that had been done by Randall Sullivan or myself or Sergio Robledo, and he put that into that film. So that film is actually, if you really watch it, is sometimes in Hollywood they kind of twist things and they turn things around. If you
Dramatization.
Watch that, it is based on the absolute fact of these investigations, and he wanted to do that for a reason, because there's a higher thing that's going on here, and that is to point out the corruption of the LAPD. So I don't mean to be selfish in saying, look at City of Lies and look at my podcast, but I also would say, look at the work of Randall Sullivan, who did, 2 books and was very close. And he's a real journalist, he's a real journalist, and he did his work.
Yeah, the second book, Dead Wrong, I think Randall Sullivan's.
I have to apologize to Randall. I always forget the second title of that, but that's a very incredible book that people should read also, because he does get into the nitty gritty of it.
There's alignment with this, what you've come across and what he's come across. You're saying this not. There are, however, and I don't want, like I said, get into too much of it. I won't keep you too long. There are folks out there that say that certain people, certain investigators weren't telling the truth or were misled by witnesses or had shaky witnesses. So I want to know if, like, some of the other theories that have been out there, some of the other directions that people have been put in are not one instance. I don't want to get into anything specific, I guess, but are there efforts to this day to seed information? We live in the age of disinformation, right? So is that continuing to happen from those involved, or is it just like you say, earlier, sort of everyone kind of just putting their own spin on it.
No, I do believe for many reasons there are still people, I think, who have done two things. They've realized that, you know, them holding on to a narrative allows them to continue to make money, which, you know, is another story. And then
Okay.
secondarily to that, I think, you know, yeah, I think when you have an open murder investigation and, you know, there could be people that are found to have been involved in that murder investigation, there's, you know, they could be held accountable for that. So,
Right.
yeah, I think there's definitely continues to be some spin. But if I'm being honest with you, I think the damage is already done. There's been
Mm.
so many things that have been put out into the, for lack of a better word, the world of YouTube and books and all of this stuff that even I find funny, even in this day and age, with as much as available, there is the truth that's available there, but
Right.
yet you can get lost if you were a young kid and was like, oh my God, I want to figure out, like, good luck, right?
The rabbit hole of YouTube interviews. Yeah.
Right. You know, and I wonder sometimes if I was younger and tried to do something like this, if I would have gotten sucked into that world, right?
Yeah.
And got lost in it. Luckily I that's not sort of my generation. I'm a bit older, as you can
Right.
see from my gray hair.
Mm.
That
I
I
know the
was like,
feeling.
oh, let me let me take this like old school journalism approach to
Yeah.
this.
Mm.
And the other thing that was important to me is in doing this podcast, you know, I come out of the television world or the film world where you work with 30 people, right? Or you work in an
Right.
environment where they tell you, well, you can't put this on the TV, you can't put this on air, you can't show this, or you can't do that. This is one of the only times in my career where no one was allowed or could tell me. Now, I'm not saying I didn't take creative input from people I respected, but
Right.
no one could control what I said or did. And no one paid me to do it. I paid myself. I had no
Yeah.
allegiance to the almighty dollar. I had allegiance to making the best story possible. That's it.
I get that. I am fiercely independent in my own bootstrapping here for some of the same reasons. I want to tell the story of how hip hop can save America, and I don't want to tell you. I don't want to be told you can't tell me. I can't talk about you when you're not doing that. You know, some company or whoever my sponsor might be, et cetera, et cetera. It's a nice place to be, and I think we need that in hip hop journalism. I come from the journalism world. I think we need more of that in journalism, and you see the expansion of journalists on Substack or kind of start funding their own enterprises, which is great to be able to see. And I'm glad that you're able to do that. Two quick questions, I guess. We'll make them as quick as you want. I know you got to, I don't want to keep you all day.
Listen, I'll stay as long as you want. You know,
I appreciate
I enjoy your platform and what you do, and I think it's important. So, however much time you want or need, I'm here.
I appreciate that. I truly do. So, a couple of questions. We mentioned all of these folks that have been investigated or were investigated or now not investigated. I want to ask a couple questions maybe about some specifics, like, for instance, these LAPD police officers that have been heavily implicated in all the investigations that have either come out or been covered up. The David Macks, those folks, where are they now and what are they doing with their lives?
So in season 2 of the dossier, I do speak to Mr. Mack, and I had a very pleasant conversation about some of the questions I had. He respectfully wanted a lot of money to tell his story, and I respect that. He is living, I believe, somewhere in California, and has gone about his life. Rafael Perez at one point was a livery driver. Funny enough, he drove for Harvey Weinstein, the Hollywood executive. I'm not sure what he's doing now. I do know I've heard various versions that either Perez or Mac have negotiated with Netflix. Because Netflix is doing a documentary about the Rampart police scandal, and they might have Mac or Perez talk. Now, I think the tricky part of having them speak about any of this is if you take in particular Rafael Perez, when Rafael Perez was arrested by the LAPD, he took 7 lie detector tests about all of the corruption he did or didn't do at the LAPD. And he lied, he did not pass 1 lie detector test. Okay.
Mm.
Also, when he described different crimes that went on within the LAPD and investigators went to investigate those crimes, they were told different stories. So no one knows what Rafael Perez didn't do. It's all a mystery. So how do you put someone like that on a TV screen and believe that he's going to tell an ounce of truth?
Interesting.
I believe that on the flip side of that, because David Mack went to federal prison for the bank robbery that he had committed, and because, for lack of a better words, he was never sort of implicated in the Rampart scandal, although he was a major player in it, he would talk about the crimes that he has done his time for, okay? But that would end at the idea of the Biggie investigation and such.
Right.
So it is an interesting dynamic of it all. Amir Muhammad, the trigger man in all of this, I believe is somewhere, in the South, I think in the Georgia area. Kevin Gaines was killed by another LAPD officer, Frank Liga, which is another story for another time. And so there are people that are alive that sort of had a hand in this, that could be charged one day. I mean, you saw what is going on in the Tupac investigation. I'm not sure that Keefe D had anything to do with it, but that's again another story, another podcast for another time. But I think at a certain point for the city of Los Angeles, the hope would be that they would want to move on from this. But as much as institutions like the LAPD say they want to change, it's been a hard task thus far.
What do you think would take that? So again, looking at the bigger issue of police corruption, of corrupt institutions like this, we've had was it LA? No, San Francisco maybe. You've had progressive DAs in the last few years that have been elected to kind of weed out some of this stuff, overturn low-level drug convictions or not prosecute those things anymore. Progressive minded that might come into a place like LA. I don't know who their DA is now, but you'll probably know. What would that take? And is it possible, in your opinion? I know we can't, predict, but could anyone actually come in from and you mentioned there might be now a federal looking into the overall cover-up. Is that what it takes? Is it going to take the feds? Is it something that a DA could turn around and say, I got to look inside? What would that take?
Well, I will say this, interestingly enough, currently I am working on a new police documentary, and I've spent a lot of times inside police departments in the last 4 months. And I think it's going to take a new young version of police administrators that want to actually change things. And I'm seeing these young cops who come from a different generation are changing. And I think that is what the hope should be. If when we talk about this, listen, there is the dire version of it, right? Which is like, it's not getting better. The progressive DAs have failed, right? That's some of the narrative. But I would actually be an optimist because of what I've seen out of these young cops. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I mean, that might be being more of an optimist than I should, but it's opened my eyes, and I think a new generation of understanding. Like, if you look at policing, there's been this old guard of policing in our major cities that come out of the Bill Bratton school of policing, right? Which is broken windows, stop and frisk, comp stat, all of this. And I think there's a shifting right now, and I think it's just going to take a new generation of understanding the past and hopefully coming to a middle ground, not an extreme, but a middle
Yeah.
ground that is public safety and criminal justice, that works.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, we have another podcast that goes into a lot of social justice issues, and we've talked about
Yeah.
the progressive DAs and what that's going to take. But that's an interesting perspective. You see it like climate change. The young folks are the ones who are going to make it happen if anything's going to happen, because like I said, the old guard, there's no incentive for them.
And I will say this, and I want to point it out because of the stuff you cover, is when these young cops have gone onto the job in this day and age, what they know is stepping into a vehicle, having a camera on their chest, having a camera in their car, having a camera pointing out,
Right.
having a camera on the street, okay? That
Right.
their superiors can turn on and listen and watch them do their job. Think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would the average human want somebody looking at them do their job the whole time? But that's all they know as young cops, right?
Right.
And
They also
that,
don't
to
have
me-
old habits to break.
Yes, yeah, is a
Yeah.
thing to think about, right? And so, when I look at the future of this stuff, I'm a little bit more hopeful but I'm also a realist with a lot of this stuff is still a mess,
Yeah. I got you. One other thing I forgot to mention, since you stayed on for a little bit more time, one of the interesting things that I heard about through your coverage was this, and we talked about this idea of disinformation, that how much of this investigation was sort of derailed or diverted because of a journalist.
Yeah,
can you give give me a little bit on that, because that was really fascinating to find out.
Yeah, so and I go into that in a bigger way in season 2. Chuck Phillips worked at the LA Times, and this is a fact. This isn't like me, speculating. There was an LAPD official whose name was Mike Burkow, and Mike Burkow was underneath Bill Bratton and was which at that time was the commissioner of the LAPD. And Mike Burkow was feeding Chuck Phillips information and story to plant into the LA Times to out, a confidential informant, to sort of derail, what Phil Carson was doing. And I mean, there had to be a meeting at the FBI between the FBI and Chuck Phillips to say, what are you doing? Like, what is going on here? And it's really interesting. What I did recently is I went back into the archive of the Los Angeles Times and I pulled all of Chuck Phillips' articles from that whole time period. And you can kind of see where he made this shift and got in bed with the LAPD. And listen, Chuck Phillips is someone who has gone into hiding. We think we know where he is, but ever since this has gone down, he's disappeared completely off the map, to never be heard from again, never has written again, never has gone on a podcast. And in this day and age, where he probably could come out of hiding and get a check
Right.
or $100 grand, $150 grand. This is a man who continues to stay in hiding for various reasons. I've been told he has recordings of LAPD officials. I have sources that have told me he has recordings of Suge Knight. I have, that he has information even about the sort of corruption that went on within Snoop Dogg's murder trial. Chuck Phillips is the last, I think, bastion of like secrets and information and a treasure trove of like, tell me what happened that hasn't talked yet. So again, I say this, there is another story in the story of Biggie and Tupac. And that, funny enough, is this journalist at the LA Times who covered all of this at the time it was going on, and was in bed with Suge, was getting paid by Suge. And what I don't know what happened, but for a man like that to completely disappear, something
Right.
serious must have happened. So it's another piece of this story
Interesting.
that I would love to tell, that I'm trying to tell, but I got to get Chuck Phillips to talk. So Chuck, if you're listening, come talk to me.
Yeah. It's not suspicious at all that you disappeared.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, obviously someone in that position would be the one to talk to. And that brings up sort of one of my, again, it's first of all, it's voluminous how much work you've put in and gone through and covered, and the season 1, season 2, there's a lot to go through when you really start going down the, your rabbit hole specifically, even just the podcast. But one of the things that I'm getting from it, which is striking, is that if not for the legend, the myth, the fame of Biggie Smalls and the public interest, the family interest, the journalism interest, the people who are doing the continuous questioning, even to this day, this what you know now to be true would probably not have been discovered or come to light or be hidden in one of the cops' hidden desk drawer file cabinets, right? It would still be there. No one would know. Maybe these guys got fired because of the other stuff, the Rampart stuff. Maybe they don't. And it just kind of disappears. And it makes me wonder how many other non-Biggies, were treated sort of the same way, but because not for that fame and that interest, we never know about.
It's an interesting you brought that up, because that to me is actually the other reason of why I really wanted to do this. Because I just said, imagine if that they can do this to one of the biggest, music superstars to ever live. And there is information in plain sight that shows you what happened to him. And yet the powers that be are able to manipulate, cover up, blackmail, whatever words you want to use to make sure the truth doesn't come out. What that tells you is a life that is a life, which is all of our rights as human beings.
Yeah.
How easy would that be for them to put a file in a drawer when a cop does something wrong, or there there was a bad shooting, there was whatever it is. It's it becomes very easy if you can do that to that level of individual. Then and Phil Carson tells the story of sitting in a big meeting with FBI officials and LAPD officials, and one of these LAPD officials says to Phil Carson, "Why do you care? This is just some crack dealer from Brooklyn." And Phil looked at him and kind of in disbelief that he would say this in a public setting, because it's moronic, and just thought to himself, man, you guys really have this wrong if you think that like this is okay and that it's just a cost of doing business, right? Of society. And so you bring up a great point. And I was watching this documentary recently about the Boston Police Department. And sure enough, who do I see as the chief of police as this massive scandal is going on is Bill Bratton. And I said to myself, man, here is a guy who is considered the pinnacle of police management policy of our country. But yet every police department he's been in, from the Boston Police Department to the NYPD to the LAPD, he's been the head of massive cover-ups that have resulted in the for lack of a better word, ruining of people's lives. People going to jail for things that they didn't do. People being planted guns and drugs on them. And who
Right.
does that go to? It should land at the feet of a police commissioner, yet he's exalted in our
Right.
society as
Sure.
this like kingmaker within policing. And I think that's important to talk about, that these patterns have gone on for 30 years. And when are you going to break those patterns? I would argue until the Bill Brattons of the world are called to the mat about what has happened underneath their watch, this is going to continue to happen because they've trained and have put in power a cabal of police commissioners across the country in our major cities. They're disciples who can understand. Well, Bill was able to, this is how Bill handled the hidden files. He had a guy.
Right.
And let's get a
Right.
guy who can hide files because we have to do that, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
it's really incredible when you think about it, you know? And I think if you don't really ingest and study all of this stuff, it's sort of, you don't know, right? And if you don't know, you don't know. But there's that part of it that, like, I think these stories, although this is a hip hop story, although this is a Biggie story, this is more about, you know, criminal justice, social justice, and police corruption. And that's it at the end of the day.
I hear that. And I talk about hip hop as being sort of this undervalued commodity. Well, commodity is a terrible word for it, but it's a culture, and that we don't respect it enough. And all the purpose of the work I do is to show people who are using hip hop in wonderful, amazing ways to help uplift humanity. And in my back of my mind, I'd be like, it would be kind of cool if, you know, the killing of one of our most beloved, you know, artists ends up being some vehicle for change somehow or another. If this lawsuit, the civil suit, does turn into something, if somebody's held accountable and it goes up the chain and it does take a Bill Bratton or that kind of level accountability, you know, and then you have young folks that are coming up with this as their cultural DNA. They kind of know this story and they're coming up differently. All of these things might happen, maybe in part, some little part, to the tragedy that befell our community. So maybe that happens.
You would hope. Yeah.
I'm an optimist too, my man. I'm an optimist too. And funny side. Yeah, well, funny side story. The one time I was quoted, you're from New York, I'm from New York. The one time I was quoted in the Daily News was calling Bill Bratton a bigot because he called rappers mostly thugs in response to something that happened at a place. And so funny enough, funny side story.
I've been thinking in the last week or so that I should really tell a story about Bill Bratton. And it just, when I saw him on that documentary, I like scratched my head and I'm like, holy shit, like, are you serious? You know? And so anyway, that's just another aside to our conversation.
All right. Well, we have that interest in common, so we'll holler. So listen, again, you touched upon it at points in this. I just kind of want to put a bow on it, if you would. Your work. Well, two things. Number one, what's coming up with the rest of the dossier that you know about, because as you said, certain things pop up along the way. So, what is kind of the can we expect over the next few episodes? Certainly. And then again, you touched on it, but overall, what is the goal? What do you hope that your work accomplishes, and how is it directing the other things that you're now looking to do in your career?
Yeah, I think with the dossier, what I've tried to do this season is take what I call the Wallace family civil documents that they used when the city of Los Angeles was sued, and really take people into the amount and the mountain of evidence that exists that shows LAPD was involved. That was one. The second part of the season is to show how a massive journalistic institution, the Los Angeles Times, and one journalist was able to shift public narrative around this case with misinformation and sort of question why, how did this happen, and was there motive or reason behind it, you know? And so for me, I just feel my next step in all of this is I would like to file, I'd say I'm preparing a laundry list of Freedom of Information Act requests to the U.S. Attorney's Office, to the LAPD, because there still are documents that are inside of the LAPD that could tell more and more of this story, and I would like to get my hands on them. So I want to continue to do that. And with my work, at the end of the day, my hope as a journalist and as a television producer is just like to continue to try and tell important stories around our criminal justice system, because there's many stories to be told. There's many, fixes that need to be made if we're going to be a civilized society and talk about rehabilitation, and what goes on around that. So my hope is to continue to look for stories that define the American criminal justice system and shine the light on things that maybe people didn't know about, or individuals that people go, wow, I didn't know that part of that story, right? And so
Right.
that's the hope, that I continue to do, and hope to do moving forward.
Yeah. Well, for those who are interested in, the Biggie story, there were a lot of times that I've said, well, I didn't know that about the story. So in terms of this case, you're doing it. The work you're doing is doing it. Even the folks who have been kind of tuned in, don't go down the rabbit holes too often of, of internet salaciousness. So I appreciate the approach. I appreciate the dedication, to be honest, because this has been now a long time following this one major story, and I can see why it's so convoluted, and there are new twists and turns, and at the very center of it, perhaps a giant bankrupt city, which is amazing to think that could, that's part of the factors at play, when it was just some crack dealer from Brooklyn that got shot. No big deal, right? So
That's what the LAPD thought,
yeah. Well, they thought wrong. Thank you for your work and for taking the time to kick it with me. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I might have left out? Where can just people follow, and do all the things?
Yeah, no, if people want more information about the project and the release of these documents, they can go to criminalmindedmedia.com. And the dossier is available wherever you listen to podcasts. And season 2 is currently up there, but you can go back and listen to season 1. And you also, within the feed, you can listen to the story of James Rosemond, or Jimmy Henchman, who many people understand. And I followed his drug cases. And so there's another criminal justice story there to listen to. So if people are interested, that's where you can find everything. And Manny, thank you for your work. It's rare that I get to meet people like you who are doing similar work, and it's not easy. So I appreciate you having me on the platform.
I know that is true, and I appreciate the appreciation. And I respect you back. Thank you. Come back when we have some more to talk about. You're always welcome to, share new findings and, that you might want to let folks know about. So thanks again, Don.
Thanks, Manny.
Well. There you have it. I'll let you digest for a second. I don't know about you, but I kind of enjoyed that interview. I am not one for chasing the salaciousness. I'm not one for chasing the connections between hip hop and criminal justice. I find that they're opportunistic and they paint a bad picture, generally speaking. There's so many stories you could be telling about hip hop. If you're a documentarian, a filmmaker, a podcaster, a TV show. I have some, by the way, I have some really good ideas. So TV, filmmaker, producer types, who want to do some more altruistic work, come talk to me. So I wouldn't normally approach this story. I wouldn't normally approach this topic, to be honest. There's so many people talking about it. But I found that Don's approach was more in line with my personal history. Shouts to my good journalist friends at Newsbeat, the Newsbeat podcast. They're coworkers, they're colleagues, they're friends, but they're also mentors. Chris Sikorski, Rashid Mian, who taught me how to do journalism, who taught me how to, follow the money, follow the documents, to go there, physically be at these places, to ingrain yourself in the story. And I found that Don's approach was really aligned with that journalistic ethos that I subscribe to. So if you find that this show, Hip Hop Can Save America, is different than other hip hop podcasts or hip hop live streams or content creators or videos, that's why. I'm not here to play the games. You can support me if you want monetarily. That'd be great. Super dope. But I'm on a mission and I'll figure out a way to do it, even if you don't. Shouts to the people that do. And I felt that Don's approach to the meticulousness in which, look, I'm going to be honest with you. The Dossier podcast, the first season is like 20 episodes long. Second season is like 7 or 8 so far. It's a lot to take in. What I also appreciate is that he'll play interviews with jailhouse informants, with the FBI agent in charge of the Biggie investigation, Phil Carson. He'll play interviews with some of the people that have contacted him, David Mack, over the years, and he'll just play them. And sometimes I'm like, all right, because listen, I don't know about you. I'll be honest, and rest in peace to my good brother. I miss my brother from another mother, Coleman, who spent many years in jail, and we both thought was wrongly convicted and kind of railroaded a little bit. And man, when he would call me from the pen, he would talk about his case over and over again, forgetting sometimes, I think, that I knew everything because I was there since day one. And he would go through everything. And you would just listen and wait for the little nugget of, because I'm trying to help him. It's a longer story. It's a longer personal Manny Faces story. We're trying to get him out. We're trying to get him, some attention to his story. But you're waiting for the little nugget of difference of something he hasn't said before, a little bit. And, if I was putting a podcast together of Coleman, which, believe me, I was crossed my mind, I would have maybe left out some stuff. And now I listen to the Dossier. Again, shouts to our guest tonight, Don Sikorski, and the Dossier podcast. The Dossier. Find it, listen to it, binge it, whatever. The fact that he lets the interviews play, skipping over some of the redundancy, not skipping over the redundancy, not cutting out any pieces, that kind of let me know, okay, this guy's not trying to make the most flash, bang, boom, bang, ha, who gotcha, snippets, sound bites, DJ Vlad, DJ Academics type of content. And I said, okay, let me look deeper. Then he has the documents. He has documents that nobody's seen, and he's just reading from them. And it's boring in a way. But if you're like me, a true journalist, a forensic journalism lover, you're like, oh, this is gold. This is the way. You go down the line meticulously. I said, my man Chris, brilliant journalist, texted me tonight and said, first thing I say from the source, oh, you got something to tell? Show me the documents. Show me the proof. Show me. I'm not taking your word for it. We're not doing this gossipy thing. We're not trying to listen to you try to politic for a reduced sentence. No, show me the documents. Show me the proof. And if all you got is words, give me enough that I can go, corroborate your story. That's what I found interesting about Don and his work on the Dossier. City of Lies, the movie, which I showed you the clip before. I didn't even know it was a thing. Fascinating look into it. I thought this guy was worth talking to. We all love Biggie Smalls. We all want his murder solved. We all know that there's something fishy going on. This shed a lot of light on it. Now, I'm not saying that he's the only one. If you go down a very short rabbit hole, you'll find there are people who point to someone else besides the aforementioned Amir Muhammad, Harry Billups, a.k.a. Amir Muhammad, as the trigger man, the one who pulled the trigger. Few people seem to dispute that the LA cops had something to do with it, though, and it was kind of coming from Suge and the death row folk. And that seems to be kind of like solidifying over the years. So without getting into the DJ Vlads, the name dropping, the whole, I wanted to say, what's your process, Don? Why do you see it the way you see it? Why did you pursue this story? And here's a guy who, like, for like umpty 9 years, followed this story, wrote about it. And again, Daniel Sullivan, who wrote the 2 books on the topic. I don't have that up anymore. You rewind and find it. Get the 2 books. Last one's called Dead Wrong. What's your motive? What's your angle? You just trying to capitalize on death and destruction? You trying to be a culture vulture? You trying to be a what's the other cool phrase, for capitalizing on primarily Black death or hip hop criminality? Or are you looking at this differently? And when I saw, I kind of got the vibe, the gist, that he was like where I'm coming from. Like, yeah, it's Biggie. Yeah, it's a murder. Yeah, it's, hip hop. But if there's a cover up here, and it's like, we don't want to get sued because we had something to do with it. We were bad cops, which is, as far as I could tell, that's fairly undisputed, at least by the investigators, the paperwork, the documents that have been uncovered. These cops were bad. They got involved in a scandal. David Mack robbed an entire bank. Now, some will say that the hit on Biggie was actually a hit on Puffy. Puffy either got word or just narrowly escaped, and Big got hit on orders by Suge, but not directly, through intermediaries, as bosses tend to do. And the hitter, the aforementioned, allegedly Amir Muhammad, came back and said, well, I didn't get Puffy, but I got Biggie. The aforementioned Suge Knight, or through the chain of, the boss to the intermediaries, the game of telephone. Well, that wasn't the job, so I'm not paying. Hitter was like, look, I hit the man's man. That's close enough. You got to pay me. But he didn't go to Suge. He went to the cops who had arranged it, the aforementioned David Mack and Rafael Perez. You got to pay me or there's going to be trouble. Same cop, David Mack, then went and robbed the bank. Why? This is some of the, intricacies of the, salaciousness that I don't really want to get into, but it's interesting. Of course, we all think it's interesting. What I found the most compelling about Don Sikorski's approach, and what I got from this, was whether or not we figure out exactly what happened to Biggie, even though it seems, for the most part, pretty clear. There's clearly evidence, documents, proof, uncovered by the FBI, uncovered by LAPD, uncovered by journalists, that there was a cover-up and an attempt, at the very least, to hide officer involvement in the murder of somebody as famous as Biggie Smalls. And that can only make me wonder, how many hidden files, how many young people, how many Black and brown people were killed, were, brutalized by Los Angeles Police Department in particular. That's who we're talking about. Because if you can cover up, and for 25 years now, 17, right? 20, I don't even know, 20 something years, avoid prosecuting the killers that are on paper have been identified of one of the most high profile criminal murder homicide cases in Los Angeles, California, American history. And you can obfuscate criminal and civil trials this long. Oh, it must have been so easy to just wipe away the life of some rando, some gang member, some kid who, listen, okay, didn't do some good things, in a bad way, was in a bad place, was not the greatest member of society, but was no less a human life than anybody else. And in the cases where the police department overstepped their bounds, as they seem to have been wont to do in this time in LA, wiped it away. How many times? Because if you can get away with it with Biggie, must have been easy. So that is like the overarching thing. As my man said, yes, it's a hip hop story for sure. That's why we're covering it. It's a Biggie Smalls story. I'm wearing Biggie tonight. I'm a New Yorker. We love Biggie. We love Tupac. We love all of our artists. We love all of our members of our communities that get brutalized and have been, put in bad situations by police, law enforcement, and overstepping of bounds. I found it very interesting that he said that spending some time with police departments now has shown him that there may be a small change brewing. And I wonder, I'd like to look into that more personally. Hope he's right. In the meantime, in between time, that was my talk with Don Sikorski of the Dossier podcast. Check that out wherever you find podcasts. Go back to season 1. It's a master. It's a master class. It's a lecture series. It's so long and in depth. There's so much information. All these names come flying at you. If you don't start at the beginning and go forward, you'll be totally lost. Who are all these people? But man, you know that thing in the movies where they got the board and the strings and the things with the push pins, and as much as you could do audibly, my man put it together. So salute to him. Not the end all be all. Certainly not. Like I say, I never endorse anybody. I never really fully give my support behind somebody. But I thought the approach was right. I thought the investigative practices were thorough. And I invite you to check it out for yourself if you're really interested in the story. Shouts once again to everyone checking in tonight. Bob Knutson might still be with us. Natalie Crew, the love of my online life. My man Mecca Godzilla. Miss Thursday. Andrew Wang, one of our great supporters. We will be back next week. Matter of fact, Andrew Wang will be joining us along with Jerome Menders and other folks that will talk about the history of Yonkers. I've teased this out a few times. Yonkers, New York. It's specifically about Yonkers, but to me, it's more broadly about areas of the United States that had an impact on hip hop history that sometimes get overlooked because of the big, cities and the big centers of entertainment. So we'll talk to them about the history of Yonkers, New York. Of course, Yonkers, we've had, D Block Locks, we've had DMX. Yonkers has had an interesting history within hip hop. I often compare it to areas like Long Island. We talked earlier tonight about Little Brother and the great documentary that's on. Well, I saw it on YouTube. I don't know where else it is, but you can see it for free on YouTube. So if you got YouTube, go watch May the Lord Watch, the Little Brother documentary out of North Carolina. We saw that North Carolina became sort of a breeding ground of hip hop, which most folks might not even be put onto till J. Cole, right? But DMV was popping long ago. Shouts to Little Brother. And so it's areas like, Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, Long Island, Yonkers, places like, New Orleans that before, Wheezy and M-Pop, areas of the country that were smaller cities, smaller areas, smaller neighborhoods, and I always find love in showing love to the local scenes. I was in Dayton, Ohio, a couple weeks ago. And shouts to my folks, MC Picket Fence, DJ Lady Bounce out in Dayton, Ohio. There's a cool little scene in Dayton, Ohio of independent musicians. And my brother-in-law, I was there for Thanksgiving. My brother-in-law plays in a band called Too Pretty. If you're in Dayton, Ohio, check out Too Pretty. But it's more like a punk garage band. You know what I mean? Like more like punk rock, like that kind of vibe. Even though they did some joints, I actually jumped on stage with them and spit a few bars, which, if you know me personally, that's a little retired from spitting bars, but we had a good time. And I just love these local scenes. You never know what's going to happen. And now I find out that Too Pretty, the punk garage band that did a cover of Childish Gambino's Redbone, which was dope, that I jumped on and spit a few drunken bars at a place called Blind Bob's in Dayton, Ohio, that my man MC Picket Fence and DJ Lady Bounce, who does a lot of dope hip hop shows out in Dayton. Now, Too Pretty going to be the backing band for a hip hop show that's coming up, in the next. Man, let me tell you something. Hip hop could save America because hip hop brings everybody together. Hip hop could save America because when there's issues that are happening in the world, the social issues, hip hop can address them, solve them, or sometimes investigate them, as we saw tonight. So I am more hyped than ever, more optimistic than ever that my premise that hip hop could save America is true. So we'll be back next week, 1 week from now, on the 11th. On the 11th. Oh man, Bob Knutson, I want to come out to Wisco, man. I want to find out who's popping out there. We actually, University of Madison, Wisconsin, actually has a great academic hip hop program. They have like a summer session that brings academics from across the world, across the country and the world to study hip hop studies. So believe me when I say I know that. Oh, the first wave, Bob, the first wave movement out in Wisconsin. I got to look it up. I got to send you information on them. I've been wanting to have them on the show forever. Let's see if we can get them on. The first wave, I think they're still active out of University of Madison, Wisconsin. Check them out. In the meantime, in between time, we'll be back next Monday at 9 for sure. We've got Yonkers popping off. We got some more hip hop news that ain't about dumb-ish. And then we'll have maybe another guest. I think I might have 2 guests next week. We're going to try that out. And then we'll be back on, well, no, won't be here on the 18th. We might be back on the 25th, Christmas Day. We'll see. In the meantime, please do subscribe. I will be sending out links to all of the stories that we covered tonight, plus obviously all the interviews and everything. mannyfaces.substack.com. It's free. And I don't do it that often, so it's not like I'm beating you over the head with it. mannyfaces.substack.com. And if you can support, if you can find $5 a month, that's helpful. $5 a month. If I was to be like, yo, let's go out, and you'd be like, oh, I'll buy you a Starbucks. And I'm like, thanks. That's $5 a month. So just do that officially. Patreon.com/mannyfaces. All of this is self-funded, and I don't really necessarily want. As soon as I get a good deal with somebody, I'm cutting all y'all off, and you're all getting it for free forever for the rest of my life. I'm torn between this. But in the meantime, I'm self-employed, running my own business, I'm producing podcasts, trying to make it happen, and all this stuff is free for you, but it costs me a lot. So if you can help me make it work, then I'll appreciate it forever. If you don't, it's all good. No problem. I understand. Trust me. I'm not giving Patreons to many people myself. Patreon.com/mannyfaces. If you could help me out, that'd be great. In the in-between time, we'll be back next Monday night. If you like what you see, hear, smell, feel, taste, hit me up. Tell me you like it. I'm a sucker for validation. Thanks again to all of our patrons. Thanks, Bob, for hanging out to the end. Natalie, I love you the best. And everyone else who checked in tonight and who's checking in on the replays. Share this. That's free, right? Just share it. Just share it to somebody. Let's get these numbers up. I have gotten incremental growth on the YouTube channel. We are going to focus on there. It's still small and tiny, and it don't mean a lot, but it's getting there. We're getting there. People are checking in even when I'm not doing shows. So, but Bob, if I could find a way to get there and have it have it covered, I'll be there. I'll go anywhere anyone brings me. That being said, by the way, this is so random, but you never know, right? Teachers, educators, schools. I'm doing something specific starting 2024. Already got a couple places lined up. It's a teacher development, professional development workshop. It has to do with hip hop, technology, STEM, and if you're a teacher, you know that every year you have to take these professional development workshops and trainings and all that. And I'm doing one. I'm doing one now, and it's in the works. And I'm coming to a couple places next year. So if you happen to know educators who might be interested in that sort of thing, reach out, hit me up. Hopefully, I'll be able to pick and choose some places I want to go to, and they'll be like, "Yeah, come through." So Madison's on the list. Natalie, wherever the hell you are, I'm coming. We're long overdue for being in person. But thank you all for checking out tonight. If you tuned in late, please go back and check the replay. The interview with Don Sikorski of the Dossier podcast. It's a lot to listen to, and it's a lot to get through. But I found it fascinating, and I want to thank him for his time, and I wish him the best. And I hope that he helps not only help solve the already kind of solved murder of Biggie Smalls, but also shines the light on the tip of the bigger iceberg, which is police corruption in America. So fascinating topic. I had a good time. I had a great time with y'all tonight. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. We'll be back next week. Then we'll take a little break for the holidays. And once again, I said in the beginning, I want to say this to anyone watching at the end. Remember that the holidays are not joyous for everybody. No, we like to have that holiday spirit, and it's fun and it's good, and I'm with it. I'm all into it. But I also recognize it's one of the things that we as a society have done better in the last few years is recognize that that's not the same for everybody. So be conscious of that. Reach out to your friends. Make sure you don't, beat people over the head with your holiday spirit. Sometimes it's not where they're at, but you can still support them, be compassionate, be empathetic. And I think that charges our empathy batteries for the rest of the year when we certainly need to be conscious of people and compassionate of people's situations. That being said, if you don't like the holidays, but you like hip hop and you like me, I cleaned up for you today. I'll be here next week. So forget the holidays. Just come chill with me. I won't mention it. We'll just act like it's a regular day, and I'll do some hip hop stuff, and you'll love it, and we'll rock. So your man, your mellow, Manny Faces. I love talking to you. I want to stay up all night with you, but I got to turn this around. I got to do the thing to YouTube. I got to clip out all the things. There's so much I got to do. We'll be back. Sign up for the newsletter. I got some really good stuff coming. Some events, some personal accolades, but stuff you might be interested in. I've got some more stories about hip hop news that isn't about dumb-ish. So just I'll leave you with this. Just sign up. Manny Faces. If it's the last thing you do tonight before you go to bed, just go to mannyfaces.substack.com. Subscribe for free. And I'll send you some good stuff. And we'll talk about hip hop. Next week, local hip hop. We're going to focus on Yonkers. And I may have something, I'm working on it, that has to do with a really great use of technology and hip hop to help uplift the lives of young people in America. Something I often talk about. So we'll be here. I hope you'll be with me. And reach out anytime. Find me. Manny Faces. Just Google me and then use your preferred platform. And you'll find me. And I'll be here. And I love you. All right, y'all. Peace and love. One time. Hey, happy birthday, Jay-Z. Still the 4th, December 4th. You know what I mean? I should play it, but I'm not gonna. But you know the song. All right. We out of here. Peace and love. It's your man, Manny Faces. MannyFaces.com. HipHopCaSaveAmerica.com. The world's most important, smartest, and most enlightening hip-hop podcast and live stream show. I can't believe we're pulling this off. Thank you. Peace and love. Yeah.